The moment I saw the ditch, I knew we were in trouble. It was July in Arizona. Not the dry, it's a dry heat kind of July that the snowbirds brag about. It was monsoon season, the air thick as soup, the sun a white-hot brand in the sky, and the humidity hanging over the desert like a wet blanket. For my little farm on the outskirts of Phoenix, water wasn't a luxury. It was life. My name is Sam Walker and I own the last working farm in the Anthem Shadows development. 20 acres of pecans, alfalfa, and a small vegetable patch that supplied 3 local farmers markets. My great-grandfather had homesteaded this land in 1923, long before the master plan communities marched across the desert. My water rights were older than the state highway department. I had a senior water right on the old consolidated ditch, a historic irrigation channel that snaked through the neighborhood, feeding a handful of us original landowners. The Anthem Shadows HOA, however, had a problem with my ditch. Specifically, they had a problem with the fact that it ran along the back of their pristine zero-lot line stucco homes. To them, it wasn't a historic waterway. It was a liability and an eyesore. It attracted ducks, they said. It made noise at night, they said. It was inconsistent with the community aesthetic. For 3 years, they had been trying to get me to pipe it underground. The cost? $300,000. I laughed every time they brought it up. My great-grandfather dug that ditch with a mule and a shovel. It had been open to the sky for 100 years. It wasn't going in a pipe on my dime. The HOA president, a corporate real estate flipper named Brad Richardson, hated me. Brad was the kind of guy who wore a blazer to a pool party and referred to his house as a compound. He saw my farm as a weed-choked nuisance that lowered his precious property values. I saw him as a suit who didn't know the difference between a pecan tree and a palm tree. It was a Tuesday. I was in the middle of my second cutting of alfalfa. The plants were stressed. The temperature was pushing 108. I walked down to the headgate to check my flow and my heart stopped. The ditch was dry. Not low. Bone dry. The mud at the bottom was already cracking in the sun. A few frantic catfish were flopping in the last remaining puddles. I checked my headgate. It was wide open. I walked upstream, past the fancy backyards with their swimming pools and artificial turf. And there it was. At the point where the ditch entered the HOA's common area, there was a brand new steel bulkhead, padlocked shut, diverting every drop of water away from my property. My water. My century-old water right. I drove straight to the HOA management office, steam practically coming out of my ears. I found Brad in the air-conditioned lobby, sipping an iced coffee. "Brad," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "Open the headgate." He smiled that plastic smile. "Sam, good to see you. Listen, the board had an emergency meeting. The seepage from your ditch was undermining the foundations of the homes on Via Montana. It's a safety hazard. We had to take immediate action to protect the community." "Seepage?" I sputtered. "That ditch has been there since 1923. Those houses were built 5 years ago. You built on my floodplain and now you're blaming me?" "We have an engineering report," he said, waving a piece of paper. "The HOA has the right, under the CC and RS and our general duty to protect the safety and welfare of the residents, to abate a nuisance. The water is shut off until you install a proper, enclosed piping system to contain your irrigation flow." "You have no right to touch that water," I said. "That's not HOA property. That's a federally recognized water right. You just committed theft." He shrugged. "Talk to our lawyers. In the meantime, I'd suggest you get your alfalfa some bottled water. It's going to be a hot week." I went home and watched my crops die. For 3 days, I watched the leaves on my young pecan trees curl and brown. I watched the alfalfa, my cash crop, wilt into useless straw. I calculated the loss, $20,000 in the ground, literally evaporating. I called the county, the state water master, even the sheriff's office. They all said the same thing: it was a civil matter. The HOA had deep pockets and expensive lawyers. I was just a farmer. On the 4th day, as I was staring at the desiccated ruin of my spring planting, my phone rang. It was an old friend, a water rights attorney named Deborah Chavez. I'd left her a voicemail in a moment of desperation. "Sam," she said, her voice crackling with energy, "stop watering the plants. I think they just handed us the case of a lifetime." "What do you mean?" "That bulkhead they installed. It's not on HOA property. I've been looking at the plat maps all morning. The easement for the consolidated ditch is a 50-foot wide federal easement. The HOA's common area stops 15 feet short of the ditch bank. That steel plate? It's sitting on your easement. They trespassed, they destroyed private property, and they stole a product, water, that has a quantifiable market value. This isn't a nuisance claim, Sam. This is criminal conversion and trespass. And the damages aren't just your crop loss. It's the water itself." She explained it to me like this: in Arizona, water is a commodity. It can be bought, sold, and leased. When Brad shut that headgate, he didn't just stop my irrigation. He stole water that was legally mine. And because he did it intentionally, with malice, after I had demanded he stop, the damages could be trebled. Punitive. We're not going to sue for my lost alfalfa, Deborah said. We're going to sue for the value of 200 acre-feet of water, times 3, plus the destruction of perennial crops, plus emotional distress. And we're going to go after their landscaping contract. Their what? The HOA doesn't maintain those common areas itself. They contract with Desert Oasis Landscaping. Guess who owns Desert Oasis Landscaping? I waited. Brad Richardson's brother-in-law. It's a sweetheart deal. $40,000 a month to keep the entryways pretty. And guess what their primary water source is for all that grass and those flowers? The ditch, I whispered, a slow smile spreading across my face. The very same. While your fields were dying, Brad was watering the petunias at the main entrance with your stolen water. We have drone photos. We filed the lawsuit in Maricopa County Superior Court. It was a thing of beauty. We didn't just ask for compensation. We asked for an injunction to immediately restore the water flow. And we asked for a forensic accounting of every drop of water used by Desert Oasis Landscaping from the consolidated ditch since the day they locked the headgate. The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Hernandez who had grown up on a farm in Yuma, took one look at the aerial photos Deborah presented. One side of the bulkhead, brown, dead, cracked earth. My farm. The other side of the bulkhead, lush, green, overwatered HOA common areas. She granted the injunction in 20 minutes. She ordered the HOA to remove the bulkhead within 24 hours or face contempt of court. Brad had to personally go out there with a pair of bolt cutters and unlock it while a local news crew filmed the whole thing. The segment was called, HOA Dries Out Farmer, Judge Fires Back. It went viral. Not that Brad cared. He still thought he was going to win. He was wrong. The discovery phase was brutal. We subpoenaed the HOA's financial records, their insurance policies, and every email Brad had ever sent. We found the smoking gun within a week. An email from Brad to his brother-in-law, dated 2 days before they installed the bulkhead. Heading to the property on Tuesday to deal with the Walker situation. Going to pinch the line. Make sure you've got the tanks full at the entryway. We might need to run the sprinklers extra long to use the surplus before it goes to waste. They knew. They knew they were stealing my water. They planned it. They even bragged about using this surplus to water their own plants. Deborah was gleeful. That's not just negligence, Sam. That's conspiracy. That's punitive damages with a cherry on top. We amended the complaint to include Desert Oasis Landscaping as a co-conspirator. 30 days after the bulkhead was installed, the HOA's world fell apart. First, the HOA's insurance company got a look at the intentional act exclusion in their policy. They immediately sent the HOA a letter reserving their rights, which is lawyer speak for you're on your own, sucker. They weren't going to pay a dime for Brad's little water heist. Second, the forensic accounting came back. Desert Oasis Landscaping had used approximately $15,000 worth of my water to maintain the HOA's common areas during those 3 days. But because they had conspired with Brad, and because the theft was intentional, Arizona's laws on conversion allowed us to claim treble damages on the water itself. That $15,000 suddenly became $45,000, just for the water. Add in the destruction of my alfalfa crop, $20,000, the long-term damage to my young pecan trees, $60,000 in future lost revenue, and my legal fees, and we were knocking on the door of $200,000. Third, the HOA board panicked. Brad tried to circle the wagons, but the other board members, seeing their personal assets on the line, HOAs can go after members for special assessments to pay for lawsuits, turned on him like a pack of coyotes. They demanded he resign. They demanded he personally cover the legal costs. He refused. So they fired him. Fourth, and this was the kicker, the HOA's contract with Desert Oasis Landscaping came up for renewal. The board, now run by people who actually had common sense, reviewed the contract and realized they were paying 40% above market rate. They voted unanimously to not renew. Brad's brother-in-law lost the account on the spot. $40,000 a month gone. They came to us on day 29 after the bulkhead went in. Not day 30 but the day before. They were desperate. The new board president, a retired school teacher named Carol, sat across from us in Deborah's office. She looked exhausted. Brad was nowhere to be seen. Mr. Walker, she said. On behalf of the Anthem Shadows HOA, I want to apologize. What was done to you was wrong. Was illegal. And it was done by people who no longer represent this community. I appreciated the sentiment, but I wasn't there for apologies. I was there for justice. We have an offer, Deborah said, sliding a piece of paper across the table. This is what it will take to make this go away. The number was $180,000. Carol winced. That's a lot of money. That's almost a full year's worth of HOA dues. That's the cost of stealing a man's livelihood, Deborah said flatly. That covers the crop loss, the water, the legal fees, and a small amount for emotional distress. It does not cover the punitive damages we could have asked for. It does not cover the RICO claims we could have filed. It does not cover the personal liability we could have pursued against Brad and his brother-in-law. You're getting off cheap because you're not them. Carol looked at the other board members. They nodded. Done, she said. The check cleared 3 weeks later. I used the money to do something I'd wanted to do for a decade. I installed a state-of-the-art drip irrigation system on my entire farm. It cost $150,000. It cut my water usage by 60%. I'm now more efficient, more profitable, and completely immune to any future shenanigans from the HOA. The ditch still runs. It always will. But now it's just a backup. A reminder. Brad moved to Texas. I heard he's trying to flip houses in Austin. His brother-in-law's landscaping company went bankrupt within 6 months. Turns out, losing a $40,000 a month contract is hard to recover from. The new HOA board is a pleasure to work with. Carol and I even worked out a deal where they can pump a small amount of water from the ditch, legally and with my permission, to maintain a small community garden they started. It's good PR for them, and it's a peace offering I was happy to accept. As for me, I'm still farming. The pecans are coming along nicely. The alfalfa is green and tall. And every time I drive past the Anthem Shadows entrance and see their new, smaller landscaping company trying to keep the petunias alive in the July heat, I can't help but smile. They learned the hard way that in the desert, water is power. And you don't mess with a man's water. The moral of the story? Be careful whose ditch you drain. You might just end up paying for his upgrades.